And we are live once again. Jeff Riemenschneider, a good long-term friend, and I have wanted you on the podcast. We were just talking, and you were instilling knowledge in me already before we even started. And stuff, what's interesting that I think will actually be pretty consistent throughout this episode is it's stuff that we inherently know, and as soon as we hear it, it makes sense. But sometimes you need somebody who's like a little smarter than you to help figure that stuff out. So welcome. I couldn't be more excited for you to be here.
Thank you very much. It's my honor and pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's I've been meaning to ask you some of these questions, especially given your role at some of these large tech companies. But before we get into anything, I want folks to get a chance to know you, and for those who don't know you, kind of know a little bit about you. So I'll go first, and then you tell me everything I missed. How about that?
Sounds great.
So, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. You were the fifth person hired at Cisco Capital. You started the large deal pursuit team for managed services. You started the software team and created a new buying program, an entirely new buying program for Cisco software, which I remember that transition. It was very pivotal to their business and the industry, frankly. In between, you had strategy and planning for the Americas. Then you left to Johnson Controls, right? To build out digital buildings. And now you're at AWS helping build out this massive holistic approach for partners that really will upskill their workforce, help them offset assets, marketing, modernization of incentives, and technology enhancements. It's a huge project. Rubicon is enormous. And so, did I leave anything out? That was just kind of your work highlights.
No. I think the only thing I'd add to it is one thing that's always been a treasure for me is continuously learning, always being curious, always figuring things out. Most of my career, I've actually been in things that are new for the company. So almost everything I did, I started at that company or I was at the beginning of that company. And I always like to do that news type of thing that actually changes stuff versus running the business. It gets a little busy or a little boring over time if you're just doing the same thing day over day over day.
Which I could see for you. We need people who are like the innovators, the starters, get it going. You're just known as an execution machine. Behind your back, when people talk about you, that's what you're known as, so it makes perfect sense to me. Yeah.
They used to make a joke. There was a TV show called Ray Donovan. And on Ray Donovan, he just got stuff done and nobody knew how it happened. And so when I was at Cisco, they used to always make a joke that I was the guy that just got it happen. They have no idea how it happened. It just got done.
So many of our mutual friends are like, oh yeah, Jeff can figure it out. If anyone can figure it out, it's Jeff, so take that as a compliment, take it for what it is. But I want to figure out a little bit behind the science of how you're doing that. How are you figuring these things out? And I genuinely believe that it starts from the top. Leadership rolls down, principles roll down, really how you address problems and seek solutions and frankly execute. The rate at which you can execute and the efficiency at which you can execute really starts with what you're allowed to do, the latitude you're given, the trust you're given, and all of that comes from the top. So which starts from the board, and you've been really a pivotal leader in some of these giant tech organizations. And so that gives you a very unique vantage point. And so I'd love to know from you maybe one or two specific things that you're seeing that really help guide boards towards being more innovative, navigating disruptive technologies compared to maybe some who aren't doing as well.
So I think the interesting thing right now that I'm seeing is everybody's on the AI train. So I don't have to tell anyone what it is. They all want to know what it is. So they're all excited about it. The challenge that they're running into is they don't know what to do with it. So getting the board to buy into this is an actual long-term investment versus short-term, staying away from your typical ROI metrics that are 12 months and less to something that's probably going to be infiltrated across all of your business is really, really hard. So when you do that, you have to have measurements that are actually something you can track that may not be a huge dollar amount. And so those are little stages that occur. The other thing I've found with most of the boards that I've worked with, in many cases, I'm seeing them be active they actually have a huge impact. So they have to actually ask hard questions. They have to get hard answers. When I was at JCI, we actually had to go do a quarterly review of what we were doing in order to build a digital building, carbon footprint, all the things that go along with it. And that package went to the board. And in many cases, they didn't understand the technology, but they understood the issue.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand how we solved the issue together. Once they figured that out, they were able to buy in pretty quickly. And then it became an initiative that you're going to do for 3+ years. If you don't focus at that level with that scrutiny, you're probably going to be at a point where you actually get off the tracks, get to a return that's quicker. At a smaller level, I'm starting to see and been asked to do certain things like advisors, where they need a CRO or they need a COO or they need a CFO and they need someone that's been in those shoes, or a CTO. The board will bring in an advisor, like almost like a temporary role, to help them go through it, because it may be their first time. So as they're going through on a smaller scale, like a Series A, Series B, they need somebody that's been in those shoes to do it, because at the beginning it's usually technology and it's usually about sales. And so what they want to do is actually figure out, how do I scale? And that usually takes someone that's done it. So that's the other thing I've seen the boards do at different levels. And it's a little different approach because it's based on the evolution of the company.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so you're talking about these difficult conversations and what that requires. We've seen, we've heard the horror stories, or, however you want to position it, of these difficult conversations where people are, really getting heated or fired up and passionate in the boardroom. What, in your experience, should that look like? Because you're right, these are big dollars, huge long-term investments. It's scary, it's unknown. I mean, we can kind of laugh about it, but remember when we thought maybe cloud wasn't going to be a thing, maybe cloud wouldn't stick around? Shocker, right? But you're exactly right that that's where we are with AI, where people are going, okay, we know this is a thing. We know everyone's talking about it, but that's very different than putting, your money where your mouth is. So how do you manage that, or how do successful boards manage those tough conversations? And what does that look like? Is it decision by committee? Is it, let's power this out? What do you see? What do you think?
So usually boards will split into different roles. So you'll have the finance committee, you'll have the audit committee, you'll have all the different committees that are there. But generally what I'm seeing though is, actually, I'll go back to JCI, we actually had to show them what the product was and get them to use it. So in the old days when we were at Cisco, we used to call it eating your own dog food. What we're finding out is we actually have to bit people to do it. So now when we're doing generative AI, we're actually using a large language model and using the bot and spitting it out. Well, it's the information you feed in is the information that comes out. And what's happening is you have a little bit of hallucination, but it's getting better and better. When people don't understand it, they get nervous. When you show them how it's done, they get very comfortable. And then it becomes an issue of, is this, in JCI, it was a carbon footprint is a big issue. In this world, it's generative AI. How do I assist you into that next movement of how you actually interact with it and actually come up with solutions? You have to actually do it by example, and you actually have to show them what it is. Smaller companies can be a little bit harder because the funding is tied to the results. And so that's where I'm seeing the advisor come into play. That's where I'm seeing some of the more difficult conversations happen, because you're going to run out of bandwidth pretty quickly because you won't have enough money to keep going. And in that, you have to always be selling your wares of the company as a CEO, and the board is the one that actually gives you those connections, and they're generally lined up to somebody, Horowitz, Sequoia, when you start moving to a Series C, Series D type of series, and that's when you get your connections. Those connections are what gets you the ability to go forward. I don't think they're as hard as people think they are. I think they're more direct. And I think people that aren't used to being in that situation take it as punishment, when they're actually just trying to get to the source of what the problem is and how do I solve it. So learning how to synthesize and then eating your own dog food have been the areas that I've seen be most effective.
You are massive. You hit it on the head. That's exactly why we're here, why I wanted to talk to you. But you are masterful at being direct, but in such a way that it doesn't, put people on the defense. It helps them. It kind of brings them in, helps them zoom out and even see what you're saying, or even the problem from a different perspective. Is that kind of what you're talking about with when you say direct, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're 100% correct. And I think that most executives have very short time. So, and they're very quick. So trying to go through all the semantics of how you got to the end game, they want to know what the score was. Did they win or did they lose?
Right.
Tell me what happened. If there's something to highlight, I want to know it, but the rest of it, I don't really care. I need to get down to the next thing. And I think most people don't put themselves in their shoes
Yes.
when they're in there because they're sitting there kind of freaked out. Oh my gosh, I'm in front of the board, or I'm in front of the CEO. They have the same problems you do. Your job is to help them understand and help them make a better decision and give them the information they need.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. They don't put themselves in sort of their leadership or board's shoes, sometimes because they don't know what it's like. I had no idea really what it meant to be a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company or CRO or chairman of the board until I got into those roles. But the good thing is we've got this thing called the internet now, which gives you so much perspective. I mean, truly, there's free research out there. There's free resources out there. And now with AI, to really step back and say, hey, put me in their shoes, help me understand what their day-to-day looks like. It really can. I like I said, I didn't even know. I was so guilty of this. But eventually, as you're kind of in these shoes or leveraging some of the resources or conversations like this one, it helps you really understand, okay, start with the end result in mind. And if they want to drill down, they will. And you have to trust that you know how to synthesize the information, you know what's most important for them, and then trust that they're going to come in and say, okay, help me better understand this. Is that what you see too, or is it different?
It's very similar, and people trust people still. As much as we want to talk about the AI world, the end of the day is you want to trust the individual that you're working with, and the board has to trust the leadership. So what I've seen routinely, even when we were at Cisco, is the leadership that was 2-3 layers down was getting in front of the board and talking to them and talking about their business, so they could understand who those people were in those roles, not just who they were on a nameplate or on an org chart. And that becomes very important as you move forward because they can trust the management's there. It also has a great way of legacy or creating a longer term legacy for the company because you can see what the bench looks like as you're creating the future because not everyone's going to be in the same roles 3, 4, 5 years out.
Right. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. And it makes sense. I mean, the mechanism is kind of used to doing things that feel familiar, and this is all very unfamiliar. But like you said, and I've said it, kind of a million times. I remember a mentor told me this years ago, and it's always stuck with me: is never forget the human element. People buy from people. People trust people. That's really the makeup. So you're right. While we have all these technical tools and AI and all that kind of stuff, it really always comes back to the human element. Yeah, that's really wise. One of the things that I'm dying to ask you, because you lead global enterprise transformation, so literally the largest transformations in the world for one of the largest companies in the world. So no stress, you've got tons of time on your hands. I mean, these are some of the largest multi-year transformation deals Amazon sees and at other companies that, you've worked with. This puts you really at the forefront of some of the most major organizations, largest transformations that are adapting, are shaping, are organizing what our future really looks like. And I think in some ways, especially as I get deeper in my role and have a way to look at, inside some of these organizations and work with them and consult with them and support them, it's even more fundamental than we realize to what this means for our future. And obviously, these are key decisions for boards. This is a critical moment for boards, like you mentioned, even if you're, at series, BC or even a larger enterprise, these are huge dollars, so even, we've talked about how can you present to a board, what kinds of questions should the board be asking? What kind of perspective should they be taking right now to get themselves ready for these major shifts and these major transformations?
So there's a couple, I'll give a couple things you should do. So it's always what's the outcome you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So when I look at what my customers are doing, if I'm a banking company, what is it going to do to enable my customers use me more or get more wallet share because I have so many things that I can do? If I'm a travel company and an airlines, how does it actually build loyalty in order to help me wind up selling you all the different locations you want to go and all the things you need in the future? So what am I doing to take care of my customer is always the beginning. The one that usually gets missed the most is actually change management and how do I have the people in place in order to do what I want to do? So while I can maybe think of what I have to do and I can understand what I need to do conceptually, do I have the horses in the barn to be able to get there? And you actually have to sometimes understand that when you do a massive change, and I see this with AI consistently, there's about 20% of the people are afraid of it. They don't want to get near it.
Yeah.
They want to get away from it. Probably 20% will lean in. It's pretty much like a bell curve. You have to move the whole 60% over to the right. Otherwise, you're going to get the 20% to drag it down. And when
Yeah.
you start a change, it's actually harder the first time you do it. So I can do a spreadsheet, I pull it up, it's done, I'm done. Now I have to train myself on how to use the new tools. Maybe
Right.
it's ServiceNow, it could be SAP, whatever. And I have to do it in a format I'm not accustomed to. Henceforth, it becomes longer, challenging, but you have to force the change. And then you have to make sure that people are ready to do it. And then in some cases, you have to change the people out. It usually is the one that gets missed the most because
Yeah.
everyone focuses on the outcome of what I'm doing and they
Yeah.
get enamored with the technology and what it'll do, but they forget that the humans are the ones actually doing it. And my org structure probably isn't relevant in the new world the
Right.
way we thought. And if that's really there, you're actually having to restart. And that's the one that I keep bringing up because it seems so simple, but it's the hardest one because it's human.
Yes.
And human to human always doesn't adapt as easily as technology. Obviously, it's what can I do? How can I do it? Do I have the people to do it? And then what do I have to do to change to make it happen while keeping Wall Street happy, while keeping everyone else happy? We understand that part as well. But this is really where the change comes in. I will say at Cisco, we wanted to be a software selling company. For 13 months in a row, Chuck talked about it every meeting.
Yeah.
It came up in every meeting. We had a meeting every month, and it came up every month. I used to get yelled at, say, "Hey, what's the deal of the month that we got to talk about?" So it was that important that there was people in the street 12 months later saying about how we were a software company, how we went and changed, how we were doing subscription, because it was repeated over and over and over. And then we hired people to implant into the
Yeah.
areas that we needed to help to get that augmentation to go faster because we didn't have it. We also learned that what we were selling, they didn't understand in the field very well.
Right.
So we categorized it into groups of threes, and I'm a big fan of the power of three. So we had three technologies, and we had three options under those technologies, and then we could scale because it got to what they could do, not what we thought was the ultimate answer for it, so that we could actually get to our customers and make it easy for consumption. Those things don't happen very easily because usually you do trial and error. If you think about the end state of your company and what you have, that change management will probably go along with the technology 2 to 3 years out. Henceforth, the long-term commitment and your measurables have to be different.
Yeah.
They can't just be the numbers.
It's so true. How many times have you seen where they geek out on the technology or sometimes even over rotate on the outcome and forget, we just talked about this, the human element of, okay,
Yep.
how do we get there? But you also brought up, great examples, you brought up loyalty. If you're an airline or, you name it, and you're trying to, how is this gaining more loyalty with our customer base or client base, depending on, what vertical you're in? That is so important. Again, not to forget the human element, because I think a lot of times we think back to the number or to the technology and you're like, wait a minute, those are the results to the outcome of what you're trying to achieve. And that is so perfectly said and so often overlooked. A lot of times, like for instance, we help with even naming conventions or building out programs, like you mentioned. I mean, as a go-to-market agency, obviously a core to our organization is enablement, is getting people where they need to be better and faster than they can themselves. That's who we are. But if you try to do that by just talking about the technology, the features, the outcome, you'll never get there. Simplifying it to those core three, the behavioral profile and analyst in me, is shining, because research time and time again, if you walk away with nothing, please, walk away with this. Your brain can't retain that much information, 3 to 7 things, and you have to hear it 7 to 11 times to even remember it and work into your long-term memory. There's so much science behind what you just said. So I'm so glad that you summarized it for us. And I hope you go back and listen to this, for folks in the audience. I cannot tell you how many times we see it at the board level. And one of the unique advantages is that we get to see all of the hyperscalers, all of the largest OEMs, all of their largest alliances and channel partners and customers. I mean, we really, thus the name Continuum, get a chance to work with all of these different personas and roles, and it is consistently a problem across all of them. So the fact that you just outlined it so quickly and so succinctly is beyond spot on. I couldn't appreciate it more.
Well, I think at the end of the day, all you want to do is solve problems for your customers and then make money for your shareholders. It's really pretty simple. And you can't do it without humans in the middle. And so if you enable the humans, you can do things at exponential speed. And if there's a purpose and a value that they understand, they'll be more committed to the company to be able to do it for them. And people by nature are pretty good. When you give them too much information, to your point, they get overwhelmed and then they don't know what to do.
They get into cognitive overload, and then their brain goes back to what has made their brain successful in the past. That's just how the wiring in our, in our own circuits work. So that's something, it's so spot on. If you can simplify it and show folks where to focus, you could get more of that team mentality, more of that movement into here's what we're trying to do, here's the vision. And then that's what makes change management and, a shift in vision and a shift in focus. That's what makes it successful, So yeah, couldn't agree more. These 20 minutes always go so fast, but we just talked about how people can't consume too much information. Otherwise they only, really remember 30% of it. So I won't go too far, but I've got two kind of related questions for you. One, where can people find you to learn more, to reach out to you? We talked about getting advisors. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, hopefully you're willing to be on additional boards and things like that. So how can they find you if they want you to become an advisor or anything like that?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm also accessible through Amazon at jreeman@Amazon. You can contact me there as well. The goal here is really to try to help others as much as possible. I'm a little later in my career than I'm in the earlier part of my career. So we're actually leaning in and trying to help people in their journey and where they're going as well. And feel free to reach out at any time.
Yeah, you really are not just a mentor. I think there's a big difference, but a sponsor for some of the greats. So thank you. Thank you for that. And then the last question, I know we're already over by 2 minutes, but are there any resources that you recommend folks look at, regardless of, maybe I know today's really focused on boards. Let's say you're newer to your board or you're trying to figure out this AI thing and you haven't really nailed down your advisor, or maybe that's part of your guidance. Where should they be going? Where should they be looking to kind of get themselves to the next level, and some resources they should be leveraging?
So I'm unfortunately a doer instead of a reader. I read a lot, but what I would tell you is actually find the partners that you trust the most that are in that industry. They will be the ones that can give you perspective. Now, just don't listen to one, listen to multiples, right? So usually you need to have 3 to 7 partners that you come in and talk to, and they'll actually tell the vision, and then you can discern what it means for your customer. Once you figure out for your customer, everything takes care of itself. Picking your partner becomes almost critical because they're an extension of your company, and an extension of who you go to market with is actually who you partner with. So your brand is who you are branded with. And so generally I found they're more than willing to share almost everything they know because they want you to buy something. But in the other side of the fence is they're actually sharing what's going on with the future and where it's heading and what others are doing so that you understand what that industry might be going to. You have multitude like an Accenture, an AWS or whatever. Those types of people will give you an alternative perspective to look at.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And there's a lot of science behind that too. It triggers the pleasure center of the brain. That's why they're willing to do it. It's the same as winning the lottery, getting a new car. It's that, same part. But no, seriously, thank you. Thank you so much for this. I think the quote of today is, if you take care of your customer, the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah.
That's the Jeff quote of the day. So thank you for being on. I would love to have you back on for this guidance, for your insights, for your transparency, because we said some stuff today that I don't think other people would have said. So thank you. That means a lot.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.